I'd really like a flat bottom.
Car Obsession is proudly supported by Carly and Draggy. Check out the video description to find out the latest discount codes. Hello guys and welcome back to Car Obsession. As you can see, I'm joined by my very own Mk2 SEAT Leon Cupra, otherwise known as Leo. I've owned him a little over 2 years, and within that time I have pumped a fair amount of money into him. So much so that in hindsight I could have afforded one of these, a Leon Cupra R. So should I have just bought one of these instead? Let's find out. Now, with these being hot hatches, it seems only natural to kick off with the power. Both cars actually have the same engine. It is a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol, which is the EA113 engine. That is the predecessor to the iconic EA888, which is used in cars such as the Golf R, the Cupra Formentor and the Audi S3, to name but a few. They may be the same engine, but of course there are some differences when it comes to power. The standard Cupra offers 240 horsepower along with 300 Newton meters of torque. The R, on the other hand, offers 265 horsepower along with 350 Newton meters of torque. This will do 62 miles per hour in 6.4 seconds, whereas the R will do it in 6.2. The top speed of the standard Cupra is 154 and this is 155. So those are the numbers out of the way. How do these two cars actually drive? Well, there's only one way to find out. Yeah, did I not mention this car isn't standard? So if you're not a regular to my channel, then let me fill you in, as Craig David would say. Now that chuckle is coming from Nico. He has joined me today to help me film. Please check out his channel, Driving with Nico. You were a guest on my channel a long time ago when I had the Nissan Leaf.
Yeah, that's right.
That
we
was
drove to Caffeine and Machine and we barely made it.
Yeah, that's a fun drive. But yes, guys, if you are new to my channel, I will fill you in on Leo. Yeah, he's not standard. So he's got
certainly doesn't sound good.
No, he's got a stage 1 AMD remap, AMD tuning based in Essex, and he's pumping out, get this, 332 horsepower along with 454 Newton meters of torque. The results, well, yeah, they're pretty dramatic. Let's change down to third. Whoa! So much power that the traction control doesn't quite know what to do with it.
No, absolutely.
332 horsepower is a lot to put through the front wheels, especially when you consider this car hasn't got a limited slip differential. Now that brings me on to a good point, because the Cupra R has got Volkswagen's XDS, which is an electronic differential lock. So it's not a limited slip differential as such, it's kind of a pseudo limited slip diff, but the idea is when you're going through a corner, to help with traction and to reduce understeer, it will brake the inside wheel, and it does work fairly well, but it isn't really a proper substitute for a proper LSD. Now, other things this car has that aren't standard, you may have heard it in the background, is a Revo induction kit, and it sounds glorious, as does the Cobra non-resonated catback exhaust. This car is also riding on iBark lower ring springs, and I've got EBC blue stuff pads all around for better stopping power. So before you argue and say, well, it's not a like-for-like comparison because they are standard and your Cupra isn't, I know that, but please bear with me. I had the chance to review the Cupra R and I took it with both hands. I thought, well, it'd be rude not to compare it to my very own Mk2 Leon Cupra. Now, before I dominate things too much, because Nico hasn't barely said anything, you've driven both cars.
I have indeed.
What are your thoughts?
Well, the one thing that stuck out for me, A, is the flutter that you get from the induction kit. That little thing.
Yes.
It does sound amazing. But also, the R, I thought would be more powerful than this. But as you say, it's more powerful stock than this stock.
Now, the interesting thing is, this car, when it was stock, actually pumped out the same power as a Cupra R, which I know sounds pretty amazing, because I had it dynoed before I had it remapped, and this was pushing out 264 horsepower, so only one less compared to the R. And get this, it had more torque, because it had, from memory, 356 Newton meters, 6 more compared to the R. The strange thing is though, and although it's been quite some time since Leo was standard, I do vaguely recall how he felt and how he performed. Although it had the same amount of power, it wasn't quite as immediate or as responsive as the R.
No, definitely getting that. That's for sure.
The R is very responsive when you hit the throttle, but we'll speak about that in due course. Now, the ride in this car when it was standard was far from great. If anything, believe it or not, the lowering springs have improved the ride, which sounds kind of mad, because you think that really it would have done the opposite.
Yeah, I would say that driving this, you wouldn't really notice that it has lowering springs. It's just a much smoother ride.
It's not bad, is it?
It's a really smooth ride. I've been in cars that have been lowered and they felt really, really stiff. And that's not a good thing.
No.
But this is nice.
So as I mentioned at the start of the video, this would have had 240 horsepower and 300 Newton meters of torque. The engine code, if you want to be really nerdy, is BWJ, that's Bravo Whiskey Juliet, whereas the Cupra R is CDL, Charlie Delta Lima. They are both fundamentally the same engine, just a different tune. And this engine is the predecessor to the EA888, in case I haven't already mentioned it. And it's a really strong, flexible engine, particularly with this remap. It's just a very torquey unit. Even in 6th gear, you've still got a good amount of pulling power. So if I slow down to 40 in 6th gear, foot down, okay, just waiting for the turbo to spool up,
You'll get there.
getting past 2,000 revs, and you can feel the power starting to come in. It's a very muscular feeling. Now, the gear change on this car when it was standard was okay, but it was too long in my opinion, and it wasn't overly precise. It just lacked, well, it lacked precision really. I've got a Forge Motorsport shorter shifter fitted, and it has transformed the gear change. It feels so much better. What are your thoughts on the gear change of this car?
Very nice, very smooth.
It's, yeah, if you were to drive the car when it was standard, I think you would have been disappointed by the gear change.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. It's difficult for me to do a fair comparison because I don't know what this car was like to drive before you modified it. But in comparison to the R, this feels tidier. Definitely feels a lot tidier.
Through the corners, Leo does really well because, of course, as I've mentioned, I've got the I-Bike lowering springs. I've also got Goodyear Eagle F1 Supersport tyres at each corner of the car, and particularly on a nice warm hot day like today, a dry day, they perform really well. There's very little in the way of body roll, brakes perform well. The steering isn't hydraulic like the Mark 1, but it still performs well. It's got a good weight to it, it's responsive. So I've got no real complaints there. One thing I would like is a flat bottom. So the pre-facelift, it got a completely round steering wheel, whereas the facelifted car got a flat bottom, which I much prefer.
I honestly thought you were talking about your bottom then.
How do you know I wasn't?
I'd really like a flat bottom.
Now to go back to the noise, when this car was standard, the noise was okay. It did just about enough to let you know that this was a hot hatch, but it was quite a subtle car. And you look at the outside, and yes, it has got a more pumped up body kit, and it's got bigger alloys and a cheeky big exhaust. But apart from that, it was almost not ashamed of being a hot hatch, but it wasn't as in your face as, let's say, maybe a fast Ford product, or indeed a Civic Type R, particularly an FK2 or a FK8, which, yeah, is almost a caricature of what a hot hatch should be. Hold that thought. Oh,
I really pulled my muscles in the face.
and he just at the end.
Oh, that flutter really gets my heart fluttering.
Yes. And as you can tell, the mods have really transformed this car. When I first bought Leo, it was more a buying choice that was more my head than my heart. When I first drove this car, I wasn't exactly enamored with how it performed. It was okay, it was capable, it ticked the right boxes, but I wouldn't go so far to call it fun. Now, that cannot be said now, as you can tell by our faces.
I was saying earlier that this car is a completely different beast to my Mini. So I've got a Mini Clubman, it's just a standard Clubman 1.5. Driving this, just amazing. I don't think I've actually driven anything as fast as this, unless you count the Caterham 270, which power to weight ratio is technically faster.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit more fun. And
yes.
I can imagine that this is good fun on the track as well.
It is.
This is your track car, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, into the R. Oh. Now it may have less power, but it doesn't actually feel that much slower. Of course it is, and you know, we've proved that, because on the A27 I was able to pull away from you in my car, but it's still got a good amount of grunt to it. And compared to when my car was standard, this definitely makes a better noise. The engine kind of snarls at you. It sounds angry, and I love it.
Yeah, it sounds a bit more refined as well. But also quieter.
Yes.
A lot quieter.
A lot quieter. There's definitely less theatre, but more theatre compared to a standard Cupra,
Absolutely,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The gear change, I would also argue, feels better. It could be minor of a matter, but the gear change in this compared to a standard Cupra, it definitely feels a bit shorter, a bit more slick. Now the R is stiffer compared to the standard Cupra, and it has bigger alloys. This has 19 inches, whereas the standard car had 18. And yeah, you can definitely feel the change in ride quality. It's not abysmal, but around town, at town speeds on poorer roads, yeah, this will definitely have you jiggling about in your seat. My car is by no means a Rolls Royce, but what are your views on the ride comfort?
Well, I am definitely noticing that this road that we came down earlier is a lot bumpier in this car.
Yeah. Thankfully, you've got these fantastic sports seats, which they are the same design primarily as the standard car, but they've got a nice diamond stitch, and of course they are trimmed in leather, which helps to give a bit of quality to this relatively low rent cabin.
Yeah, definitely bouncing around a lot more though.
Yeah, the tyres, if I'm not mistaken, are a lower profile, because they've got a profile of 35, whereas I'm sure my car is 40. And of course, yes, these rims are bigger, and the tyres are also wider in this car. They're 235 as opposed to 225, and that means better grip, of course.
I was going to say it should mean better grip around the corners, which yes, very much so.
This, as I mentioned, has got the XDS as well. The brakes feel a bit sharper.
Definitely a lot sharper.
Oh.
For a car...
Whoa.
I was about to say, for a car that's 11 years old, this has been kept in very good condition.
It has. So, this is part of SEAT's heritage fleet. So, it's a cherished car, and although it will change by the end of the day, at present, it's under 10,000 miles, which is insane. We are doing a fair bit of driving today, so that I will be going over 10,000 miles, which does feel like quite an occasion.
It's like you're popping its 10,000th cherry.
Yes, exactly. This puts the power down better. That's probably down to the XDS, although mind you, I think the XDS is more for cornering. And this has less power, of course, so it's got less power to manage.
I'd almost say that this has a very similar throttle response. It's just less theatrics, like what you were saying earlier. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't shout as much as yours.
Yeah, I would also say, although this has less power, I would say the band of power is probably wider, because in my car, I sense, you may disagree, I sense that you need to wait a little bit more for the power to come in, but when it comes in, all hell breaks loose. I'd say my car perhaps got a little bit more lag compared to this car, whereas this feels more immediate.
It does indeed, yeah.
The cornerings is very similar. Maybe my car corners a tad flatter, I don't know. There really isn't that much in it. Again, the steering weight is very good, the brakes perform well, and this really is a tidy car in the corners. Mind you, if you want a proper driver's car of a hot hatch, then you may be better placed with the Renault Megane RS, because yeah, that is an absolute weapon. But this is by no means a bad car.
And I guess, how do you think this would compare if this had an induction kit?
Oh, I think it'd sound awesome. I think it would sound so good. I'd also quite like to put this on a dyno, which sadly isn't going to happen, because I think this is pushing out more than 265. Because my car was pushing out 264, and it didn't feel as immediate as this does. Yes, granted, this has had tweaks to the ECU, but yeah, this feels stronger, in my opinion, than 265. And let's face it, my car was meant to have 240, when in fact I had 264. So I reckon this car has actually got more power than what is quoted by SEAT. Just a theory though, I've got nothing to back that up.
We will never know.
We shall never know, no. What I love about the R is that, compared to my car when it was standard, everything you interact with, all the components are just tighter, tauter, more focused. It's like the standard car has been sent to boot camp for a month, so it's come back fitter, chiseled, more alert, more responsive. And that's what this feels like. Sorry to use an old cliche, but it feels like a Cupra that's been turned up to 11. I know that is a very tired cliche, but it's true.
It definitely feels that way.
I just love the way how everything just feels that extra bit focused, a bit more racy. Now, before I drive off into the sunset and declare my love for the Cupra R that I mucked up and bought the wrong car, there is a bit of a fly in this wonderful ointment, and it is a strange one, so you'll need to bear with me. It's the clutch pedal, and you may think, okay, where is Aaron going with this? Well, on my car, which as I've mentioned or may have mentioned is a pre-facelift standard Cupra, the clutch pedal is set closer to the brake pedal. And that means I can put my foot quite comfortably on the footrest, so when I'm not changing gear, when I'm just cruising, I can rest my foot and my leg very nicely indeed. Strangely, for this car, which is of course a facelift, SEAT has moved the clutch pedal quite dramatically to the left-hand side, closer to the centre console. That means I personally, I don't know if it's affected you, Nico, but I've got less room on the footrest, and that means my left foot and my left leg are never really comfortable, which puts strain on my knee, which I've got a bit of a chronic knee injury, and therefore is a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. I've got big feet. My feet are size 12s.
Yeah, I've got size 11, so yeah.
Size 11, so just about the same.
Yeah.
But like I only drove this car, what, 20, 30 minutes or so, and I noticed it, but I didn't really think much of it. But I think on longer distance journeys, it would be more problematic, for sure.
And this may sound really silly, but is that enough to be a deal breaker for me? Honestly, probably. And it's mad to think that the only thing stopping me from buying this car is a matter of 1 or 2 centimetres. It's crazy. To be fair though, when I was in a position to buy my Mk2, I didn't quite have enough money for one of these. It's just through time and unfortunate circumstances, I've come into a bit more money, and that's money I was able to put into Leo. So if I'd maybe held off, I could have bought one of these, and to be fair, I probably still could if I sold Leo and put a bit of money into it. But that alone, as silly as it sounds, that probably would be enough to put me off buying the car, and it's a real shame.
So hang on, you're saying that if the clutch pedal was 2 centimeters to the right, you would sell Leo in a heartbeat and get this?
Not in a heartbeat.
Not in a heartbeat.
No.
Okay.
I would consider it, but yeah, it's crazy to think how just one simple thing, the position of a clutch pedal, kind of changes the whole dynamic of a potential ownership of a car. Because I do sometimes drive long distances. For example, I'm going to be driving my Mk2 up to Donington at the end of August, and would I want to do that same drive in this, with this ride and the lack of proper footrest space? I don't think I would enjoy it as much. I really wouldn't.
Well guys, it comes down to the Cupra R and Aaron's Cupra. Which one would I decide? I think I'd go for Aaron's, but it's not my opinion that matters, it's yours. So tell us, which one would you go for?
Needless to say, I love the Cupra R, and it is a proper beast, and it is definitely a large enhancement over the standard car. But I do need to have a bit of bias here. This is my own car. I've put my own money, blood, sweat and tears into improving it, and I just don't think I could get on with the footrest in that car. I know it sounds very trivial and pedantic, but after all this, it all comes down to 1 or 2 centimetres. I'm sorry, Cupra R, but I have to have Leo. He's the one for me. A massive thank you to Nico for assisting with filming. A massive thank you to SEAT UK for loaning me their lovely Cupra R for the week. And above all, a massive thank you to you guys watching this video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. If so, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. If you are subscribed, don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I make a video. But until the next time guys, keep up the car obsession.